Thank you for staying with Consider This. I'm Melisa, Idris, with me Sharaad, Kuttan, and we're chatting to the good folks of Policy Lab, James Chai as well as Faris Aiman. Now, I want to get both of you, your thoughts on voter education. So how is what Policy Lab doing different from, say, voter education when it comes to, educating an entire new generation of young voters with Undi 18? Is it the same? Do you see similarities or is it different? Faris, do you want to take this?
I think for Policy Lab, we are slightly more technical because when I see for other NGOs, they are more towards speaking out, towards awareness, this is your responsibility. But in Policy Lab, we are more towards calculations, data, statistics.
Real skills.
Real
right?
skills.
Okay. But you mean you're teaching those people who come to you about data? About what kind of data? What exactly do you mean by you're more towards data?
More towards data as in, because of course when it comes to crafting framework in policies, we need to find data, find the right, because right now we have a lot of data. It is up to us what we want to do with it and put it in a more structural and organized form and to make something good out of it.
Okay, well, you also mentioned a little bit earlier before the break, James, that Policy Lab is a platform for discourse with young people. What's missing in this, what conversations are you having that was missing, say, a year ago? Conversations that you guys are having with your peers now that a year ago, 2 years ago, was missing from the discourse space?
What we think was that because it was so difficult to defeat the Barisan National Government, at that time, a lot of people from civil society organization, as long as you have some sort of influence in society, you get sort of co-opted or absorbed into politics. So what happens after the election was that there's sort of a vacuum in the civil society space. And I think civil societies, organizations are extremely important in between elections, because then, if not, your role would be reduced to just voting, right? Now, in that particular context, all sorts of discourse hasn't really been harnessed yet. We don't see enough civil society organization making it to the mainstream, developing some sort of narrative. So we think that with Policy Lab, by preparing a platform, it at least encourages those kind of discourse forward.
Okay, I want to ask you this, and this is directly related to the question of public policy, because public policy is often an issue of trade-offs. Well, what do you want and what do you have to give up in order to get something else? Opportunity cost, right? Do you think young people understand this, especially people coming through the civil society organizations who are very quick to have a laundry list of demands?
Yes.
And and the Pakatan is suffering for its manifesto, which is a laundry list of demands, right? With no sense of the limitations. Fiscal and also limitations that are placed on governments to actually realize this. A trade-off, something that you kind of want to deal with and grapple with?
We think that considerations of discourse as well as limitations are more likely if policy is your main focus. If politics is what you're particularly driven by, which actually civil society are also driven by that when there are more egoistic intentions, right? Then it would be thwarted by something else, right? We see a lot of politicians always coming up with quick policy suggestions, and the idea is that, trust me with it, I'll handle it, without much details as to how you're going to execute it.
6,350,000 jobs.
Not particularly, but something along those lines, right? Where people are not normally informed as to how do you solve such a complex issue, right? With an emphasis on policy, it's more likely for you to consider those kind of trade-offs. And we are seeing that among our group of people, where you are taught subjects which are quite agnostic in terms of their ideological leanings, but more emphasis on the practicalities, on saying that if you want to look into certain issues, you must also be wary of the limitations that are involved in it.
Are there, I guess, I'm just wondering whether there is significant interest in this. I mean, you're assuming that young people as a whole, one block, which is never the case, right? No one community acts the same way, votes the same way, thinks the same way, multifaceted. So are the young people that you're targeting a minority? Are largely youth apathetic when it comes to policy making? Is that a conversation that you're having with yourselves within Policy Lab?
I mean, how do you address the apathy? The people who don't want to get involved, don't know how to get involved, in fact, don't really just want to avoid it.
Yeah.
Okay. I think one thing is that it also, because right now our classes are done in English, I think it has to be as diverse as possible because James and I, we have plans to do Policy Lab in Bahasa Malaysia as well, and that will somewhat target more Malay people, hopefully in the future, because the thing
Malay speaking,
Malay speaking people, because our concern for Policy Lab is that we do not want it to be as distant, because from my personal experience, also my peers, sometimes they feel like policy making, politics, and all these public and intellectual discourses can be seen as somewhat distant from them. And I think we need to break the language barrier in order for us to reach out to more people in the future.
Yeah, could I just add on one point? Because we had the same suspicion before we started, whether the young people that we normally read on newspapers, whether they're actually apathetic or whether they're disillusioned.
Right?
That's the assumption, right? But week after week, we have consistently at least 30 to 40 people coming to our classes. In the span of 4 to 5 months, we have already 290 people coming into our system. And 1/3 of it were developed by word of mouth. Right? And that's why we think that's the greatest testament that these people really still do care about what happens to the country. And it is probably true, our assumption at the start, that we are filling in a gap that direly needs to be filled in.
Well, you know, a lot of what you've said seems to be also in line with what the Youth and Sports Ministry wants to do. So is there any collaboration happening there? I mean, are you engaging with the ministry, the minister, in fact?
Or do you want to be independent?
No, we think that we are very, very open to exploring opportunities like that, because after all, they are the people who hold the greatest levers of power. So any kind of influence that we could have into policy making is certainly something that we are interested in, either as an organization or people who came through our system and they individually discover it, right? So Faris himself is involved in one of the majlis that is held through a consultative session, and we think that those are important. Wherever he needs any kind of help in developing ideas as well as research, we have at least a pool of people from Policy Lab who are already ready to do this kind of work. So we think that that's the extent of our involvement for now.
All right, in the little time that we have left, gentlemen, can you tell us a little bit, you know, if our viewers here want to know more about Policy Lab, where do they go to?
If our Facebook page, so it is spelled POLISILAB, so that's Policy Lab, or on Instagram. So it would be quite obvious to find, and anyone who is interested to come for our week-to-week classes, they are definitely more than open to do so. They only need to fill out an simple application form, and they will be able to access classes like economics, history, writing, and it's free.
Free classes.
Free classes.
That's always exciting.
All right, there you go. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being on the show today. That's all the time we have for you on this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, with me, Sharaad Kuttan. We will be back with you same time tomorrow. Good night.